kind of talk about this. We have Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. She was an early opponent of the war in Iraq and the only member of Congress to vote against authorization for the use of military force in the wake of 9/11. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us this morning. So in the wake of some of these comments, I'm just curious. You have Chuck Hagel this week saying that this is beyond anything we've seen, talking about ISIS. You have Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that ISIS is ultimately something we're going to have to defeat, and that if we're going to defeat it, it's going to have to be in Syria, and that even then airstrikes alone might not be enough. When you look at what ISIS represents and when you look at these comments, I'm just curious, do you think that's correct, what they're saying?
Steve, first of all, I'm delighted to be with you this morning, and I just have to say there's no doubt that ISIS is extremely dangerous. I think that's very clear, and I fully agree. I think most people would believe what this administration is telling us. I think what we have to recognize, though, is this. Some of us, or many of us, supported limited and targeted airstrikes to prevent genocide and also to protect the United States personnel. We also said, myself and others included, that any expansion of airstrikes or any expansion of our military operations should be done within the context of a full debate and a vote for authorization for this use. What I'm concerned about is that it is expanding and we have not had any type of congressional debate or authorization. I believe that the American people deserve to hear what the alternatives and options are. They need to know the facts, and the way we do that is through the involvement of Congress in our constitutional responsibility as it relates to debating and authorizing.
So you're saying if there's going to be airstrikes in Syria, you first want a congressional debate and a congressional vote to authorize that?
Absolutely, because the public needs to understand what is taking place. First of all, the American people are war weary. And we have to be very careful if, in fact, we're going to insert the United States back into a conflict in Iraq and now possibly in Syria. We also have to remember that there have been some who have been calling for arming the rebels in Syria, when, in fact, these rebels are partially ISIS. And so if we move into Syria, I think the public needs to understand what is taking place. We need to have a debate. That's the only way it will be clear to the American people exactly what the options are and what is taking place. Anything short of that, I believe, means that Congress is really, once again, abdicating its constitutional responsibility to engage in what is a very serious responsibility, and that's debate and authorizing the use of force.
When you look at the comparisons that are being made, again, we had Chuck Hagel this week saying, ISIS beyond anything we've seen before, saying in a lot of ways more sophisticated than Al-Qaeda. Everybody's talking about how this group ISIS is so much more extreme than Al-Qaeda. I understand everybody's hesitance in this country. It's perfectly understandable to get involved in any way in the Middle East after the last 10, 12 years and what those wars have resulted in for this country. But when you look at that threat from ISIS, I wonder, that potential threat from ISIS at least, I wonder, does that make you change your thinking about the role the United States should be playing in the Middle East potentially?
Well, first of all, I think the threat is real. But once again, what is important at this stage, and I think it's very important that we say this over and over again, that we have to understand the facts. We have to know exactly what the impact consequences could be if, in fact, this administration decides to broaden the United States into a war. And we have to really come to grips with what is taking place. I think the only way you do that, Steve, once again, is coming to Congress and having a full debate so the public understands this. At this point, we have not had that. The president and this administration has acted appropriately by keeping Congress informed. But because ISIS is so dangerous, and because it appears that the administration is considering the expansion of military strikes, it's absolutely essential that the American people understand that and understand the implication and the impact of this and know exactly what is taking place. We can't do that without the full a full debate and a full authorization and a vote in Congress.
All right, well, we'll see. I guess one of the open questions always here is, does Congress, certainly Congresswoman Barbara Lee, you want that debate. The question always is, do your colleagues want that debate? That's been an issue, too, in the last few years. We'll see if Congress steps up and demands that. My thanks to California Congresswoman Barbara Lee for joining me this morning. Really appreciate the time. And still ahead, if future stability in Ferguson, Missouri rests on whether a grand jury hands down charges against the police officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. We're going to take a look at that case and how it is likely to proceed. That's next.